gentlemen, it is a great honor and a triple pleasure to be here in your midst tonight. I say triple because firstly, it is always a sense of homecoming, however strange this may sound to lots of you, to be in Germany, especially in southern Germany, for reasons that have to do with my childhood, which I am not going to elaborate on. The second strand of the pleasure has to do with the fact that I'm in a great university, and I've spent all my life in universities, and every time I return after this 1 year of absence from academic life to one of the great universities of the world, I feel elated and I feel a double homecoming. Thirdly, it's an honor to be sharing a platform with Professor Sinn and to have this opportunity to communicate directly with you and not through the distortionary lens of the media, which has a lot to answer for in this era of crisis, for preventing our peoples in Europe from getting closer together and instead spearheading greater centrifugal forces that are pushing us apart. Allow me to make a small correction, or actually an addition to your introduction about my father, because I think that it would resonate in the German audience. My father was born and raised in Egypt. His mother was French. He was raised in the spirit of the French Enlightenment by a very quirky Frenchwoman who raised him on a diet of Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Voltaire, but also Immanuel Kant. When he went to Greece at the age of 20, this was allowed in the civil war between the left and the right. And both factions of the university where he was studying chemistry, because there was this period of an attempt to have a left-right détente, chose my father, who was a complete outsider, as the president of the Students' Union. And when later on, a few weeks later, there was a doubling of the fees for students at the time of great hunger in post-war Greece, 1946, my father did what he thought he should do as the president of the Students' Union. That is, complain to the rector. The secret police arrested him for that subversive act, and he was beaten up lightly, just a little bit. And then the good cop came around and said to him, well, here's a document, just sign it and you're out. And it was a document denouncing communism. And my father said to the policeman, this secret policeman, I'm not a communist, but I'm not Muslim either. And I'm not a Buddhist. If you ask me to denounce Islam or Buddhism, I wouldn't do it. It's none of your business. So he ended up in a concentration camp out of pure liberal rejection of the right of the state. And in the end, because he was with communists, he joined the Communist Party. But what he said to me, and I think this would resonate with you here in Germany, is that he said, Yanis, when I was in that concentration camp, and I was a member of the party and of the communists, even back then, I knew that if our side had won, the communist side, I would be in the same concentration camp with different centers. You see what I mean? These divisions need to be broken down. And unfortunately in Europe we have a lot of those, we had a lot of those. Germany was divided. And unfortunately, this European crisis, this European monetary union crisis, is pushing, as I said before, our nations apart. And this is a great tragedy for me personally. It is something that is one of the reasons why I threw my hat in the political ring last January. Let me speak to you about this decision, as well as the reason why, from a situation where I was a game theorist writing abstract texts that no more than 20 people around the world ever read, and they were not intended to read it because it was highly abstract stuff that was not for public consumption, how it is that I became prominent and then I ended up running for office, parliamentary office, and then government. What happened was, my nation in 2010 went bankrupt, as you all know. I'm not going to go into an analysis now of why that happened, but our state became insolvent, in the sense of being incapable of servicing its debt. How did Europe and the governments respond to this? They responded by lending to the most bankrupt member state of the Eurozone the largest sum of money ever lent to anyone in human history, under conditions of fiscal consolidation that ensured with probability 100% that our income would shrink. The very income that was incapable of sustaining the existing debt now would have to shrink and would have to sustain not only the unsustainable existing debt, but also the new gargantuan bailout loans. It was in January 2010 that I became known in Greece as something beyond just an academic, because I said something that upset the powers that be in Athens, that the Greek state was bankrupt. And when you're a bankrupt entity, you don't have the right to take on new loans until and unless you restructure your debts, and unless you restructure your operations so as to be able to produce the incomes from which to pay your debts. I thought that was a straightforward statement to me. I thought that this was common sense. I couldn't believe that anyone could contest that. We could have a discussion as to whether the Greek state was bankrupt or it wasn't bankrupt. But this was a discussion that was banned in the European Union in 2010. Anyone who dared have a serious discussion, or attempt to have a serious discussion, on whether Greece was facing a problem of solvency or a problem of liquidity. Not the same thing. If you have a problem of liquidity, you should borrow. If you have a problem of solvency, you shouldn't. Not until and unless you have a serious restructuring. Anyone who dared have this conversation was immediately banished as anti-European, as somebody whose views were beyond the pale. Those voices were drowned, and in May 2010, Europe, in its infinite wisdom, indulged in what rogue bankers do, which is extending and pretending. Extending the crisis into the future by means of new loans, pretending that it was solved. When in reality, all that happens is that the crisis gets deeper, the bankruptcy heftier, and you simply defer to the future where the problem gets worse. Meanwhile, the fabric of the economy, the real economy of Greece, was being depleted. And then, of course, when you extend and pretend, either at some point you're going to come clean on this and admit that this is what you're doing, or you're going to give another extended and pretend loan, which is what happened in 2012. Now, the reason why I stood was because I had an agreement with the leader of the party that recruited me that we would go to Brussels and would come to Berlin or to Frankfurt, wherever it was necessary to go, in order to have a serious conversation with our partners, with International Monetary Fund, and say to them this: we were not elected to extend and pretend further. Let's have a serious discussion about a genuine solution to this problem. Because the longer we perpetuate this extend and pretend, the longer we cover up the problem, the longer we deny the essence of the issue, the greater the damage we are inflicting upon a proud nation, the Greeks, who are suffering, who have lost hope, who are turning to Nazism. Remember, the third largest party in Greece is a Nazi party, not a neo-Nazi party. It's a fully fledged Nazi party, of the kind that you have so successfully managed to eradicate from this country. And at the same time, the policies that are being tried out in Greece are transplanted in other parts of the Eurozone. The debts of the Greek state are corrosive and toxic for the rest of the Eurozone, and the domino effect is transforming itself from the bond markets to the investment markets to deflationary forces that are undermining the capacity of countries like Portugal, like Spain, and so on and so forth, to achieve escape velocity, to escape from the crisis that began in the late part of the 2000s. The reason why I became a polarizing figure was not because this message was recalcitrant, that it was left-wing. There was nothing left-wing in what I said to my colleagues in the Eurogroup. All I said was,